The architect, a black Tahoe, forced her off the interstate. Then came the alley, the fist, the face of a man she'd never seen. Then the encrypted drive with the phrase that made her spine rigid. The first person you killed. By the time Emily Harper understood what was happening, her mentor was pointing a gun at her heart, and everything she'd built was ash. 13 hours earlier, her Tuesday had begun like any other. Emily's index finger slid under the flap of the manila envelope, the paper tearing with a sharp, dry rasp that filled the quiet office. The label read, Vance Julian, tax year 2023, in the neat script of her neighbor's accountant. She upended the folder. A stack of 1099 forms and receipts spilled across the mahogany desk, fanning out under the green glass shade of the desk lamp. Dust motes danced in the light, caught between the world of fluorescent intentionality and the ordinary Tuesday evening beyond her window. Rain pattered against the glass. Emily had been a forensic accountant for 11 years. She knew how to read the language written in ledgers and receipts, the confessions that numbers make when pressed. This folder was supposed to be routine. Her neighbor, Julian Vance, a mild-mannered software consultant who lived 3 houses down, had asked her to verify his tax filings. A favor, the kind neighbors did in suburban Asheville. She'd told him she'd take a look. As she fanned out the papers, something else hit the desk. A heavy, hollow thud. A slim, silver lace-eye rugged hard drive wrapped in a blue silicone sleeve materialized among the forms. It had been taped inside a hollowed-out stack of ledger printouts, the kind of hiding place that someone used when they were either very paranoid or very informed. Emily's breath caught. She picked up the drive. Her thumb brushed over a handwritten label on the back. Black Sharpie ink, permanent, slightly smudged. Project Olympus, Asheville. The hum of the house heater filled the silence. She carried the drive to her MacBook Pro and plugged it in with the precision of someone handling evidence. A progress bar appeared on the screen. Encrypted. Enter password. Below it, a hint in Arial font. A single line that made her spine go rigid. The first person you killed. Emily's hands trembled as she pulled them back from the keyboard. The cursor blinked in the password field, waiting. The house heater hummed. Rain fell. And in that moment, suspended between one breath and the next, she understood that the ordinary Tuesday had ended. She had no password to enter. She had killed no one. But someone had gone to considerable trouble to ensure that she would find this drive. Someone had placed it in a neighbor's tax file knowing that she would see it. Someone had written that message. Emily closed the laptop. She packed the drive into her laptop bag and locked her home office door, a habit from years of handling sensitive financial records. Her hands were still trembling as she descended the stairs and grabbed her keys. Outside, the rain had intensified. The streets of her neighborhood were slick and empty. She needed to think. She needed distance. She drove to the office downtown, a 3-story brick building that housed her firm, Harper and Associates Forensic Analysis. The parking lot was empty at this hour. Her space was near the rear entrance, beyond the glow of the streetlights. She'd always liked the privacy. The alleyway behind the building was darker than usual. Emily's heels clicked fast against the damp pavement as she made her way to her Honda. She fumbled with her car keys, the metal cold and slick from the rain. Her mind was still caught on the encrypted drive, on the message, on the implication that somehow, someone knew something about her that required an oblique and terrifying reference. The shadow came from nowhere. A heavy, gloved hand clamped over her mouth. She felt herself dragged backward into the dark recess of a dumpster, her car keys flying from her grip and hitting the concrete with a metallic jingle that echoed off the brick. She tried to scream, but the glove was leather and efficient. trained. The attacker slammed her against the brick wall. Her head bounced off the masonry with a sickening thud that sent white sparks across her vision. An arm pinned her throat. She felt herself choking, the pressure building in her skull. Her laptop bag was being torn from her shoulder. "Give me the drive, Emily." The voice was distorted, low, a whisper that carried the weight of certainty. He knew her name. He knew about the drive. And he was going to kill her. She drove her knee upward with everything she had. The attacker doubled over with a wheeze that sounded almost surprised. She slammed her palm into his nose, feeling the cartilage crunch, a wet, solid sound that her body recognized as damage. The arm loosened. She spun away and grabbed her bag from the ground, where it had fallen. Emily bolted toward her Honda, her shoes splashing through a puddle, her breath ragged and raw. She dived into the driver's seat. The car rocked on its suspension as she slammed the door and locked it, her hands fumbling with the ignition. The engine caught. She threw it into reverse, tires squealing. In the rearview mirror, the attacker was staggering, one hand covering his face, the other reaching out as if he could somehow pull her back into the dark. She didn't think. She accelerated toward the main road, her hands locked on the steering wheel, her breath coming in sharp, controlled gasps. The dashboard glowed with the time. 10:47 p.m. The attack had taken less than 3 minutes. Emily drove to the Stone Ridge Hotel, a boutique place near the airport where she occasionally met clients who valued discretion. She checked in under a false name and paid cash. The desk clerk didn't look up. She took the key to room 314 and climbed the stairs instead of using the elevator. Once inside, she double-locked the door and engaged the security bar. Only then did she allow herself to sit. The hotel room was small and impersonal. Beige walls, beige bedspread, beige curtains. She placed her laptop on the bed and opened it, hands still trembling. The hard drive was in her bag, miraculously intact. She plugged it in using a USB-C cable, and the same password screen appeared. Encrypted. Enter password. The first person you killed. Emily stared at the phrase. It wasn't a question. It was formatted as a statement, as if the writer already knew the answer, as if it was a riddle where the solution was supposed to be self-evident. She thought of the people in her life. Her parents, both alive. Her ex-husband, alive. Her sister in Portland, alive. She had never been in the military. She had never been in an accident that caused someone's death. She was an accountant. Her weapons were spreadsheets and forensic algorithms. Unless, she typed slowly, Lily Ann. The drive clicked and whirled. Nothing happened. Wrong password. She tried. Nobody. Nothing. She tried. Conscience. The drive clicked. The folder opened. A grid of faces filled the screen. AI-generated women, all perfect, all with different names. Each folder was labeled with a political title. Senator Ward, Mayor Chen, Governor Miller. Each folder contained fake DM logs, doctored photos, fabricated evidence of affairs, blackmail material constructed with the precision of someone who understood digital forgery. Emily's breath came faster. This wasn't just evidence. This was a weaponized database, a blackmail operation built on synthetic media, and it had been hidden inside her neighbor's tax return. She clicked deeper into one of the folders. Fake conversation logs, timestamps, images that looked real but were built from algorithms. A woman's face, different in each photo but always vaguely familiar. The kind of person who seemed real until you looked closely and saw the imperceptible distortion in the eyes. At the bottom of the folder, a hidden file. Vance Proof, Joe Pease. Emily clicked it. The photograph opened. It showed her neighbor, Julian Vance, standing in an old warehouse. His face was clear. His hands were empty. And on the concrete floor in front of him was a body. A young woman. Real. Dead. The face in the photo matched the AI-generated Lily Ann from the folders. Emily's mouth covered itself with her own hand. Tears welled. She could hear the hum of the AC, the distant sound of traffic outside, the sound of her own breathing as it began to accelerate into panic. She scrolled further into the files. Chat logs appeared. Recipient. The architect. The messages traced the installation of the drive, the payment of a bank transfer, and finally, a single line that made her blood freeze. Emily has the drive. Handle it. Emily understood then. The drive hadn't been a mistake. The envelope hadn't been accidentally placed in her hands. Someone had deliberately put this into her neighbor's tax files, knowing that she would find it, knowing that she would examine it, knowing that it would lead her exactly here. Trapped, terrified, understanding that she was now implicated in something vast and violent. The question wasn't who had written the password hint. It was why they had wanted her to find it. She spent the rest of the night copying the drive's contents onto a secured cloud account, working with the methodical precision of someone who understood that this might be her only copy. By 5 a.m., she had stored everything. By 6 a.m., she had researched the faces in the files and confirmed what she already suspected. Every one of them was a public official in North Carolina. Every one of them could be destroyed by the fake evidence contained in the Project Olympus database. By 7 a.m., she had decided to go to her mentor. Arthur Sterling's private library occupied the entire third floor of a restored brownstone in the Montford neighborhood. Floor-to-ceiling shelves held thousands of law books, arranged with the precision of someone who had spent a lifetime organizing evidence and precedent. Morning sun cut through the tall windows, and dust motes danced in the shafts of light. Arthur himself stood at a sideboard, pouring amber liquid into a crystal tumbler. It was 9 a.m. Emily had expected coffee. The whiskey suggested that he had been expecting this. "Sit," he said, not turning around. Emily sat in one of the leather chairs facing his massive oak desk. She had known Arthur for 15 years. He had been her mentor when she was beginning her career as a forensic accountant, had guided her through her first major cases, had recommended her to clients, both public and private. He was brilliant, connected, and, she was beginning to suspect, compromised. Arthur turned, holding the crystal tumbler. He studied her face with the calculating gaze of someone reading a financial statement. "You found something," he said. Not a question. "I need your advice," Emily said carefully. "Hypothetically." Arthur settled into his chair and took a slow sip of whiskey. "There are no hypotheticals, Emily. There are only facts and decisions." "What are the facts?" Emily told him about the drive, about the password, about the fake blackmail material and the photograph of her neighbor. Arthur listened without interrupting, his expression remaining unchanged. The face of a lawyer who had heard many confessions and was judging none of them. When she finished, Arthur was quiet for a long moment. "This is bigger than local politics," he said finally, his voice gravelly and protective. "If you go to the police, you're a dead woman. I saw someone try that once. Took them 3 weeks to find the body." He paused. "Bury it, for your own sake." "It's a murder," Emily said. "Julian Vance is my neighbor. I can't just—" "You can and you will," Arthur interrupted. His voice had changed, no longer protective, but commanding. "If you go to the authorities with that drive, you become a loose end. People who become loose ends get tied up. That's how this works, Emily. That's how it always works." Arthur turned to answer a phone that had begun vibrating on his desk. As he reached for it, Emily's eyes drifted across the surface of his desk blotter. There was a memo pad there, covered in his handwriting. Notes, calculations, and one line, written in the same distinctive slant she had seen on the label of the hard drive. Project Olympus, update log. Emily's hand instinctively went to her bag, where the drive now rested. Not to retrieve it, but to confirm it was still there. The handwriting was identical. The same flourish on the capital P. The same aggressive angle on the slant of the letters. Arthur had written that label. Arthur was involved. She forced herself to sit still as he spoke into the phone in clipped, efficient sentences about depositions and discovery. She forced herself to maintain an expression of confusion and fear, which, she realized, was not difficult. The fear was completely genuine. The confusion was simply about which part of her world she should be afraid of. When he hung up, Arthur returned his attention to her. "Go home," he said. "Don't call the police. Don't talk to anyone. Let this pass. There are forces at work here that you don't understand, and the best thing you can do is make yourself small and quiet." Emily left the brownstone at 11:15 a.m. She drove toward home on I-26, her mind spinning, her hands gripping the steering wheel. Arthur Sterling, the man who had taught her everything about reading the language of numbers, had just told her to abandon evidence of a murder. Arthur Sterling had written the label on the drive. Arthur Sterling was the architect. She was so focused on this thought that she almost didn't notice the black Tahoe changing lanes behind her. It came fast and aggressive, cutting through traffic with the precision of someone who was comfortable with violence. The driver was clearly visible through the windshield, a man with a lean face and dead eyes. He swerved into her lane. The metal of the Tahoe's bumper ground against her passenger door with a shower of sparks. Her steering wheel jerked violently. She fought to maintain control as the vehicles locked together, metal screaming against metal. Her side mirror snapped off and flew into the air, tumbling through the wind. Emily slammed on the brakes. The Tahoe shot ahead. She yanked the wheel and veered onto the grassy median, dirt and debris exploding from under her tires. The Honda bumped and rattled across the rough ground. Behind her, the Tahoe tried to follow, but the driver had overcalculated the maneuver. She cut hard toward the exit ramp, and the Tahoe overshot the turn, forced to brake heavily and reverse. Emily took the exit at 70 miles per hour, her tires squealing as she carved through the curve. The Tahoe was no longer visible. She drove for another 5 minutes, checking her mirrors obsessively, before pulling into a parking garage near downtown. She sat in the car with the engine off, trying to steady her breathing. Her hands were shaking. The drive was still in her bag. The metadata she had copied, the email logs, the photographs, they were all still in her secured cloud account. But now she knew. She wasn't running from a killer. She was running from her mentor. The man she had trusted for 15 years had set this in motion. He had placed the drive in Julian Vance's files, knowing that she would find it. He had used her, was using her, as a witness to evidence that he himself had fabricated. She had been groomed, positioned, made into a critical piece of a much larger conspiracy. Emily pulled up her phone and opened a secure messaging app. She found a digital cafe in the Arts District and drove there, her eyes constantly checking the mirrors. At 2 p.m., she sat in the back corner of the cafe with a black coffee and her laptop, pulling up the drive's metadata using command line tools. She traced the ownership information backward, the encryption algorithms, the file system structure, and there, buried in the code, a confirmation of what she had begun to suspect. Owner, a Sterling LC. The drive didn't monitor the politicians. It was used to create the blackmail material, Arthur Sterling had built this system from the ground up. He had fabricated evidence. He had created synthetic likenesses and false conversations. He had murdered Julian Vance, or had him murdered, to contain the secret. And he had given the drive to Emily, expecting her to either A. Be too frightened to act, or B. Go to the police, where he would ensure that she became the suspect in Julian Vance's death. Either way, she became either a silenced witness or a convenient culprit. Emily closed the laptop and sat very still, her coffee growing cold in front of her. She had one move left, one card to play, and it would require her to walk into the trap with her eyes open. The neighborhood community center was a single-story brick building that served as a gathering place for the suburban enclave where Emily lived. On Thursday evening at 7 p.m., it was filled with folding chairs and neighbors eating cookies from paper plates. The Homeowners Association was holding its quarterly meeting, and every seat was occupied. Emily stood at the back, watching Arthur at the podium. He looked exactly as he should, distinguished, compassionate, the picture of community leadership. He wore a navy blazer and an expression of genuine concern as he discussed the new traffic light that had been installed at the intersection of Elm and 3rd. He smiled at people he recognized. He nodded at their concerns. He was, to anyone watching, the exact kind of person a neighborhood would trust with its safety and its future. When Arthur's eyes found Emily standing in the back, his smile didn't change. But something in his expression shifted. A crystalline certainty, the look of a man who has been expecting someone to show up and is pleased by their obedience. He finished his remarks about the traffic light and opened the meeting to community concerns. A woman raised her hand about the pool maintenance schedule. A man asked about increasing the security patrols. And then Arthur said something that made Emily's blood go cold. I'm also pleased to report that we've invited a special guest this evening. Emily Harper, our neighbor and a leading forensic accountant in the region, has agreed to discuss some concerns about neighborhood financial transparency. He was announcing her. He was making her the focus of attention. He was positioning her. Emily turned to leave. But the doors at the back of the hall were already being closed by a tall, lean man in a tan jacket. The same man who had been driving the Tahoe. The same man with dead eyes. Arthur was still smiling at the podium. Emily, he called out, his voice warm and encouraging. Why don't you come up and share your thoughts with the neighborhood? The neighbors turned to look at her. 300 pairs of eyes, friendly faces, people she had waved to on morning walks, people who had no idea what was about to happen. Emily walked forward, her mind racing. The utility room. She had been in it once during a previous HOA event. It was where they stored the folding chairs and the cleaning supplies. It was behind the main hall, accessible through a side passage. She did not go to the podium. Instead, she moved toward the side corridor, toward the utility room. She could feel the shift in Arthur's expression. A moment of confusion, then recalibration. The lean man in the tan jacket moved to intercept her. But she was already through the corridor door and into the utility room. The door closed behind her. She could hear him on the other side, then his footsteps entering the corridor. Emily backed herself into the darkest corner of the room, her phone in her hand, her finger on the button for the emergency services. The utility room was exactly as she remembered. A narrow space lined with metal shelving, folding chairs stacked in racks, boxes of supplies, and an exposed network of pipes running along the ceiling. The door burst open. The lean man's silhouette filled the frame. Emily recognized the shape of his body. He was the same man who had grabbed her in the alley, the same man who had driven the Tahoe. He stepped inside, and she could see his face now. Thin features, eyes that had seen too much violence to be disturbed by any more. He said nothing. He simply moved toward her with the purposefulness of someone completing a task. Emily grabbed a loose metal chair leg from the ground. She had yanked it free from one of the collapsed stacks just moments before, in case she needed exactly this kind of weapon. The man slammed her into a rack of metal folding chairs. They collapsed with a deafening, echoing clatter that sounded like the destruction of the world. Emily felt her breath knocked out of her body. The man reached for her throat with both hands, his fingers closing around her neck with the casual expertise of someone who had strangled people before. Stars bloomed in Emily's vision. She swung the chair leg with both hands, a two-handed grip like a baseball bat, and caught him across the temple. The impact was solid. He staggered, his grip loosening. Emily kicked him into a stack of cardboard boxes, and he fell backward with a crash. She bolted for the side door. It was locked. The handle didn't budge. She was trapped. Behind her, the man was already moving, shaking off the impact, pressing himself to his feet. He was bleeding from a cut on his temple, a thin rivulet running down his face. But his expression hadn't changed. He was simply going to try again, with more purpose this time. That was when the utility room door opened and Arthur Sterling stepped inside. He held a Glock 43 with a suppressor attached. The gun was small and efficient, the weapon of someone who had carefully chosen their tools. He looked down at Emily, who was backed against the locked door, and held out his hand. "The drive," he said simply. Emily's hand shook as she reached into her laptop bag. The silver lacy hard drive, the encrypted one, the fake one she had backed up days ago, slid from her fingers and fell into Arthur's palm. "Good," he said. "And the cloud backups?" "Gone," Emily lied. "Deleted everything." Arthur smiled. It was the smile of someone who didn't believe her, but found it endearing that she was trying. "Julian was weak," he said, his voice perfectly conversational, as if they were discussing neighborhood business. "That's why I killed him and used his tax return to ship the drive to you. I needed a forensic accountant to legitimize the fake evidence, someone with credentials, someone whose discovery of the blackmail would make it look real to the courts." He paused. "You were my final witness, Emily. Everything you're about to say to the authorities will have the weight of a professional's credibility. You'll make my case for me." Emily understood then. The entire operation had been designed to use her. She wasn't uncovering a secret. She was being groomed to discover it, so the fake blackmail would seem authentic when it was deployed. The password hint, the panic, the attack in the alley. All of it was choreography designed to make her desperate, to make her run, to make her eventually decide that she had to go to the police to save herself. And the police would listen to her because she was a forensic accountant. They would believe her analysis of the drive. They would use her evidence. And once the politicians were destroyed by the fake blackmail material, Arthur would reveal that Emily had fabricated the evidence. She would go to prison. He would be free. She was the pawn. She had been the pawn the entire time. The lean man had recovered from the blow to his head and was moving toward her again. Arthur watched, the gun hanging loose at his side. He wasn't in any hurry. They had all night. Emily lunged sideways, not toward the door, not toward Arthur, but toward the industrial server rack in the corner, the one that controlled the building's fire suppression system. She ripped a bundle of copper wires from the patch panel and touched them to the sprinkler sensor directly above her head. The electrical crackle was immediate. The wires sparked. And then came the hiss, a loud, overwhelming hiss of water activating. The sprinkler head exploded into a fine mist that drenched everything in the room. The fire alarm began to scream, a rhythmic, deafening wail that filled the utility room and echoed through the entire building. Red strobe lights started to flash. In the chaos and the blinding mist, Emily kicked Arthur's knee and dived past him. The gun went off. A soft sound, suppressed, almost inaudible beneath the screaming alarm. The bullet passed through where she had been standing an instant before. She was already through the door and into the main hall. Water was pouring from the ceiling now, drenching everyone. 300 neighbors were screaming, gathering their things, trying to reach the exits. Emily pushed through the crowd toward the podium at the front of the hall. She grabbed the microphone. She wasn't speaking to the room. She was holding up her phone, which she had been live streaming to the city's news portal for the last 5 minutes, ever since the moment the lean man had entered the utility room. The entire attack was recorded, the entire chase, everything up to this moment. She pointed the phone toward the corridor where Arthur was emerging, soaked and furious. "Say it for the camera, Arthur," Emily said, her voice amplified through the microphone and echoing through the dripping hall. "Tell them how you killed Julian. It's live. 10,000 people are watching." Arthur froze. The gun was still in his hand, visible to everyone now. He looked at the phone, then at the neighbors who were all recording him with their own devices. 300 people, every one of them with a camera, every one of them documenting this moment. He slowly lowered the gun. Police sirens wailed directly outside. Tactical units burst through the main doors, water still pouring from the ceiling, emergency lights casting everything in alternating colors. Officers moved through the crowd with practiced efficiency. They saw the gun in Arthur's hand. They moved fast. The suppressor came off the Glock with a snap. The gun fell to the floor. Arthur Sterling, distinguished attorney and trusted mentor, was on his knees with his hands locked behind his head. Emily lowered the phone. She stood by an ambulance at 9:30 p.m., a shock blanket wrapped around her shoulders. The rain had stopped. The emergency vehicles had mostly left. Crime scene investigators were still inside the community center, photographing evidence, taking statements. Her phone buzzed. An unknown sender. No name, no identifying information. Just a message containing a link to a cloud drive. The real Project Olympus. Emily hesitated. Then she clicked it. A video player opened. And there was Julian Vance, her neighbor, smiling at the camera. He looked tired but peaceful. The timestamp on the video was dated 3 days before his death. "Emily, if you're seeing this, I knew Arthur was coming," Julian said. His voice was gentle, almost apologetic. "I knew what he wanted. The drive he told me to give you, the one with your name on it, that's fake. The password, though, the hint he put on it, that was about me. The first person I killed was my conscience. I killed it the day I agreed to help Arthur with this scheme. I thought I could keep my hands clean. I thought I was just facilitating digital evidence. But there are no clean hands in this, Emily. There's only complicity. So here's the real data. Not the fake files Arthur built. The real transactions. The real proof. This is what you need." The video ended. Emily looked down at her phone. The real Project Olympus data was downloading to her secure drive. Bank transfers, communication logs, everything she needed to prove not just Arthur's guilt, but the entire operation. The names of the politicians who had hired him, the structure of the conspiracy, all of it. A police officer approached her, a young woman with kind eyes and a water-stained uniform. "Ms. Harper? We're going to need you to come down to the station to give a full statement. But first, are you okay? Do you need medical attention?" Emily shook her head. She looked at the police car where Arthur Sterling was being led, his hands cuffed behind his back. He looked small now, diminished. Just a man in a wet blazer being taken to a place where his intelligence and sophistication would mean nothing. The officer led her toward the police car. Emily took a sip of hot coffee from a paper cup. Someone had handed it to her while she was waiting, and tossed it into a nearby trash bin. She could see the old, silver hard drive inside the bin, the one Arthur had taken from her in the utility room. The fake one. The bait. She walked toward the police line, her back straight, the shock blanket wrapped around her shoulders like evidence of survival. Behind her, a police car door slammed shut. The rain had washed the grime from her face. The sirens had finally stopped. All that remained was the distant sound of water dripping from the gutters of the community center, where 300 neighbors had witnessed a man's life compress into a single moment of violent revelation. She didn't look back at the building. She didn't look back at Arthur's car as it drove away. She simply walked forward into the night, one step after another, into whatever came next.